Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat to some of the interesting figures and leading lights in this crazy industry of writing and self-publishing. And today we are absolutely delighted to have as a special guest Travis Cody, who has two first names, both of which sound like they should be a romance character. And he is a very, very exciting guest to have on board because he is one of the few people to be successful in writing in 4 different industries. So, Hollywood screenwriter, journalist, one of the top copywriters in the world, and an author. So that's all 4 quadrants covered there. Travis, we are delighted to have you on the show. How are you?
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing well, thank you, Roland, and welcome, Travis. This is exciting. As Roland mentioned, you are successful in so many different areas. And there are tons of things we could talk to you about. But, today we need to focus on something. So we were going to focus on actually what happens to be the topic of your latest book, Bestseller by Design. It's the idea that movies and books, so screenplays and books, sort of have the same process behind them when it comes to putting them together and writing and all that. And so, we're going to get you to take us through that. But to start off, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got all started and how you ended up where you are today?
Well, I'm one of those annoying people that writing has always just sort of come easy to me. It's one of those things that I didn't really. So I have some friends that are fantastic artists, and from the time they were 7 or 8 years old, they were making 3-dimensional lifelike doodles. Right? They didn't even think about it; they just did it. And the rest of us are looking at that, going, "Oh my gosh, I do that." It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized that's sort of the way it was with me in writing. So, and I guess I'm a bit of a protege. My grandfather was a fairly accomplished writer. He had sold a lot of writing in his lifetime. I actually didn't know that until after he passed away. And the advent of this mystical thing called the internet, I Googled my grandfather's name and found an article that was interviewing him, talking about how he had sold 2,500 articles by the time he was 25. So this was back in the 40s and 50s. So selling articles directly to the magazines. So I guess you could say it's in my blood. But I wrote my first book when I was 12. At 16 years old, I essentially got recruited by a newspaper and became the youngest paid journalist in their 128-year history. Had my eyes set on Hollywood, so after I got out of college, I headed to Hollywood and ended up as a screenwriter working for a producer by the name of Jonathan Crane. He was John Travolta's manager, producing partner for about 20 years, so he did some huge movies: Phenomenon, Look Who's Talking, General's Daughter, Broken Arrow. Swordfish, those were all his. So I worked with him directly for 15 years. And along the way, I just would kind of write and publish books. Again, I didn't really think about it. It was just, I have this idea. Let me figure that out. I publish it. I did everything they tell you not to do. Didn't have an audience, didn't have a platform, didn't really have a goal for it. It was more of just entertaining to myself. I'm like, let me write this idea down and put it in a book. And then I would publish it and wouldn't give it any thought at all. It was just so I have some books that it just exists out there. And then, I became enamored with direct marketing when I was working in Hollywood, working with Jonathan Crane, because this whole idea of direct marketers can spend $1 and they know exactly how much money they're getting back for that dollar spent. That was like alien language to me in Hollywood. Our marketing department was like, let's just throw $100 million at this thing and hope for the best, right? I actually remember conversations I had where I went in and said, well, if we're spending $10 million with HBO, how do we know how much money we're getting back from HBO? And they're like, what are you talking about? That's not how this works. Like, it's 10 million with HBO and 10 million with ABC, and we put this amount here. And so I originally started studying sales copy because I wanted to see, is there a way to bridge direct marketing and Hollywood principles? And I thought if I could ever figure that out, Bob's your uncle, as they would say. So when my mentor passed away, we had some huge projects that we were working on. They all kind of, fell apart because they were all based off of his track record. And I was just burnt out on Hollywood, to be honest. I was tired of the grind. I was tired of the mindset, definitely tired of the egos. And so I just had a bunch of opportunities to sort of transitioned directly into sales copy, and that's where I lived for a number of years, and I would publish books and write sales copy for people, and eventually sales copy clients started asking me, can you help me do a book? And that's how I ended up sort of becoming a book coach. I didn't choose that. I helped one person, it did well. They hit the bestseller list. All their friends asked them, how did that work? And, hey, go talk to that guy. And being the brilliant marketer that I was, after about the 20th person that paid me money, I said, hey, maybe there's something maybe people need some help with this. So here we are.
I find that fascinating. I mean, the blurb of a book sells it or doesn't sell it. I mean, and I've always been good at writing blurbs because I come from a copywriting background, and I think that's it. It's a different skill set to writing.
Yeah, it is. And you know, this is I just had this conversation with my wife a couple of days ago. So the irony of all of this is I've written a ton of stuff. I have never actually written a fiction book. I've never written prose. And so I'm in the process of, I'm like, I'm just going to take all the screenplays that I wrote and turn them into books. And dealing with the ego of realizing like, oh man, I'm really good at all these other things, and now I'm starting prose fiction, and it's a completely different skill set, and having to sort of look in the mirror and go, I am a complete and utter novice when it comes to this. And my ego does not like admitting, like, but no, like, you write all these amazing sales letters and you've sold screenplays, and when it comes to a book, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I've had to hire a coach to help me because I am trying to write my prose like screenwriting, and you can't do that. They're different skill sets.
So is that what led you to writing this one, the Bestseller by Design? So from what you've learned from that process?
So Bestseller by Design was a book designed for entrepreneurs, founders, coaches, consultants, anybody who has got some experience in their industry, and they are able to, you know, they have their own process for helping people get a result. So it's Bestseller by Design was created entirely for someone who's in business that wants to become a best-selling author and then use that book to grow their business, right?
Yeah. Like a lead magnet.
Yeah, it happens to be coaches and consultants are most of the people that find me on LinkedIn. But I really broke down the process that when someone hires me to work with them, like, what are the exact steps that I take someone through for A to Z to go from I have an idea to being published on Amazon. And then, you know, once that's done, answering that big question of your book's published and it's on the bestseller list, and you have that excitement for about 8 seconds before your brain goes, well, now what? now what do I do with this thing? So we help them answer the now what of how do you actually then leverage the book to help you reach your goals. So for me, what that came down to was, it was sort of a, you know, just like anything, it was several years to sort of synthesize the ideas. But the process that I take people through is a 6-step process, and I call it the M.O.V.I.E.S process, M-O.V.I.E.S. One, because it's a catchy phrase, and two, when my clients have a tendency to get lost in the woods, which, you know, we all do that from time to time, I'll just ask them like, okay, so where let's go back to the movies. Where are you at? Which step were you in? Oh, I was on V. Okay, now we can get in there and go. And it just gives people a little mental, like, to keep coming back to where they need to be so they can to help reach their goals.
I guess, I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead, Craig.
I was just going to say, how about we quickly go through the M.O.V.I.E.S process? What are
Sure.
those steps?
So this is the insight that I had, again, 15 years in Hollywood, and I don't know, 9 or 10 books before I went, hey, wait a minute. Writing a book and making a movie are actually a very similar process. So, and there's 6 steps to this, right? So in Hollywood, you have pre-production. And pre-production is, you got a plan, you know, it's when the scripts are getting done, locations are being found, right? Nobody's giving Steven Spielberg $200 million and he's showing up on set with 100 people going, right, what are we doing? For whatever reason, a lot of first-time authors, when they sit down to write a book, that's kind of what they do. They just sit down and like, I have an idea and I'm just going to start writing, and the idea will find me. So if you'll go through a pre-production process first and actually plan what you want to talk about, it's going to make the process much easier when you get into production, step 2, which is the physical creation of the product, right? Now, here's the interesting thing about filmmaking: pre-production, production, post-production. It's about an 18 to 24 month process. The actual physical making of the movie where their cameras are on and they're putting stuff on film, that's the shortest part of the entire process of filmmaking. But that's where all the sex appeal is. So everybody thinks, oh, that's where everything happens. But it's not. It's like that's the smallest time. And I realized that when you're creating a book, it's exactly the same way. If you do the pre-production, if you plan correctly, the actual creation of the rough draft of your book, that is actually the shortest part of the process. So for my clients, I say 30 days or less, but I've had clients that, very busy CEOs, they'll just fly out to Vegas for 2 days and we'll actually get the whole thing done in a weekend. Now, look, I emphasize rough, right? We don't create that quickly and have it published ready. And that's another sort of big myth that I find first-time authors that I'm working with is I'm going to write this thing and it needs to be published ready the instant that I write it. And what's interesting is, again, coming back to Hollywood, when I don't know if you've ever seen a Marvel movie and seen behind the scenes of a Marvel movie or any sort of
big, it's just green, isn't it? Behind the scenes, just green.
Yeah, I mean, Avatar. Have you seen Avatar?
Yeah.
They got blue dots on their. That's what they actually filmed. That's on the camera. And so James Cameron isn't going, hey, here's the people with blue dots on their face, and we're going to put that on the screen, and everyone's going to pay us for that. No. Like they know that's the rough draft, and then it goes through this whole other process of getting cleaned up. And this is the other interesting aspect of it, is that it's somebody else that's doing it. James Cameron generally speaking, isn't doing the editing, isn't doing all the CGI, isn't doing the sound. Now, he'll oversee that, right? Same Spielberg doesn't do the editing or CGI. They take it to a post-production where other experts come in and they do it for you. And as authors, that's one of the ways we can compress time, plan well, create quickly, realizing it's a rough draft, and then find a team of experts who can help you polish it to where you need to be. And so that way, instead of spending 3 or 4 hours a day, you can drop down to maybe an hour a week because you're overseeing someone else that's editing it and helping you put the polishing touches on it. Is that what I'm trying to say there?
Polishing touches. I don't know. I like that.
So now there we are in the film, right? Pre-production, production, post-production. So then what do we got to do? All right, well, now we've got to do the world premiere. So for authors, that's getting the book on Amazon and live. Then Hollywood does a huge PR campaign, 3 weeks of the stars out there hitting the circuit, talking about the movie. That's the worldwide launch. So for authors, that's marketing their book and doing everything they can to push it up onto the bestseller list. And the final step in my process is S. It stands for sales machine, but it's more about how do you merchandise your book. And this is another big mistake that people will get caught up with books, is they get focused in on book. Everything is on book sales. All the money is from book sales. It's all got to be on Amazon. I got to sell my book on Amazon. But that's not where the real money is made. The real money is made on the back end. How do you leverage it, right? And it's the same with Hollywood. The movie is really just a tool to sell merchandise. I mean, every Marvel movie, every Disney movie, it's all designed to sell something else. And a good example of this is the first 6 Star Wars movies. So those movies collectively made about $4.6 billion at the box office. Nothing to sneeze at. And that's what everybody focuses on. George Lucas happened to own 100% of the merchandising to Star Wars. And that for those same 6 movies, he made $28 billion off of merchandising. So he made 4 times the amount of money from leveraging those movies for something else. And it's the same, again, in my process, if you're a coach or a consultant or a thought leader, using the book to push and how do you merchandise that now? So for many of us, it's info products, it's coaching programs, it's workshops, it's live events, right? So I always like to say it starts with the book. And ultimately a book for you is I call it the magic key. It opens this door to opportunities that you don't really have without it. But you got to get the book done first. And so with the work that I do with my clients, we really are intentional with, it's great. Let's get the book done, get it on the best, this be #1 at the box office for the weekend, right? But then let's really merchandise that. And now let's really leverage it and start creating juice out of it. And Bob Proctor, if you know who he is, he actually he has one of my favorite quotes where somebody was asking him, they said, "Oh, I want to be a millionaire author like you," and he said, "Oh no, there's a misperception there." He said, "I haven't made a dime off of any of my best-selling books. And you could hear the audience kind of gasp, was like, what? And then he got this little twinkle in his eye and he said, but I have made millions from being a best-selling author. And it's because all of his books pushed into his other programs. And I think that's, if you're an entrepreneur and you're wanting to use a book to, you know, be more influential and have more impact, looking at the book as a tool that's a leverage point to help you get other things is, you know, that I think that's a smart play.
I mean, our whole industry,
these are both different strategies too, right? I'm not saying that, like, I have clients that are selling thousands of copies per month on Amazon, but that's a strategy, right? And then you've got people that are in the direct marketing space, like Russell Brunson or Frank Kern, and they're selling all of their books off of Amazon, right? Also a strategy. Two different strategies. It just depends what your goals are.
Yeah, it's very interesting how you mentioned like a direct sales thing. We just had a gentleman called Steve Piper on who was talking about is the next generation of authors going to be doing direct sales rather than selling on Amazon?
Yeah. I think there's a bit of both, but I think most authors are probably going to, you know, I think most of the juice is going to be building community. Obviously, we leverage Amazon to help that. And, you know, people, let's face it, somebody Googles you. Amazon is usually, if you got books on Amazon, that's the second or third thing that comes up. So there is a place for it. But yeah, I think we're getting back into the sort of the having small communities that support their artists. Is just kind of like back in the days with the vinyl, right? There would be a small sort of cult of people that followed the artists on the vinyl records that kept them and having them a career. And every now and then they would kind of break out. And I think author-wise, I feel like it's more of an enjoyable process when you're directly connected to your audience as well, because you can get that direct, immediate feedback, which I don't think that you can have with a big publisher like Penguin or Random House.
Absolutely not. So, that's fascinating.
I think, yeah, and I think a lot of this is sort of geared towards nonfiction writing, right? So
this book is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that process, I think a lot of it would work for both, right? But I think the idea of, you know, the people that are making more of their money from the ancillary stuff related to being a bestseller are people like you're talking about, like thought leaders, CEOs, you know, entrepreneurs, people that are going to, like that are speaking, doing public speaking events, and you know, they can sell their book afterwards. But also, it's the fact that they're a best-selling author that helps draw that crowd in, right?
Yeah, well, and that's one of the leverage points, right? Can you get a best-selling book and then leverage that to get paid speaking engagements, right? So, I mean, you've heard story, and I have 2 clients that do this, where they, in lieu of speaking fee, like, how many people are going to be in your audience? Oh, we're going to have 600 people. Awesome. I'm not going to charge you a speaking fee. You just have to get on Amazon and buy 600 copies of my book, right? And so they're also leveraging it that way, right?
Right.
So there's ways to do it. Now, the funny thing is the 3 steps of the process are the same for fiction as well. So you do need to plan. And I know there's a lot of debate about pantsers versus plotters.
Yeah.
And I always have people ask me about that. And I'll just say, so I actually ran the writer's room for Jonathan Crane. We over the years, we had probably 25 different writers that kind of came through. At any given time, we'd have 6 or 7 writers in the writer's room. And I will say that when I was there, all of the writers that were pantsers, they all had like at least a dozen half-finished screenplays. All the writers that were plotters didn't have any unfinished screenplays because they had them done. Now, it doesn't mean that some of them are rough drafts, but they were actually completed and done. So I always say I'm hard pressed to see the advantage of a pantser over a plotter, from my experience.
Listen,
I think
I'm definitely
Stephen King would argue with me. I know for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a different mindset for sure. We had an episode where we sort of did a pantser versus plotter throwdown, and we had somebody who was more firmly pantser and more firmly plotter, and then I'm far more of a plotter, and Roland is sort of in between, but he can go and be pantsing or plotting. But I for me it's almost like I can't even imagine sitting down without any idea about what I'm going to write, and then just going. And then I feel like I'd write myself into a corner half the time.
Yeah, well, that's what these screenwriters did that I worked with. That had a bunch of a dozen half-finished screenplays. Get to a point, couldn't figure it out. Now, there's not to say, like, so for me with my brainstorming, when I'm sitting down and coming up with my big ideas for what I want to write about, that's all pantser, right? Like it's all free form brainstorming in a room with a whiteboard and just writing any idea that comes down.
Sure. Well,
but then once
yeah.
we've got one core idea, then that's where we'll sit down and start building plot around that. I don't think you can plot a big idea. I think that does have to be a bit of a free form.
Haven't they always said that, you know, coming up with the concept could be, it was a group activity, writing was a solitary activity?
It is, yeah. Well, in the writer's room is exactly what it was, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the beautiful thing about it is, and I have a story. Like there's a project we're working on, the partner and I are on, called the Writer's Room, and it's a virtual online community for writers. And it came about like several years ago. I was kind of looking at my productivity with writing, and it was just like, man, like it was not the way that it used to be when I was in Hollywood. I used to, you know, we would plot a script in a week and I would write a script in a week. And I was trying to figure out why now that I was independent and doing sales, copy, and marketing in my own books, why were there some weeks that were super productive and some that weren't? And it was that camaraderie. It was the sitting down with people and having the ability to brainstorm, talk things through, and then go, okay, great. And so you weren't always just kind of stuck in your head by yourself in your office, right? Which is kind of where we are right now. And so, but there is having somebody to bounce off ideas is crucial, I think.
I love that. I mean, I totally agree with that. You know, everybody's mind works differently, right? You start down a certain path and you can get to a spot, right? But then somebody else can come in and take you past that spot. And that might be their only contribution. And they just come in and say, hey, but what about this? And that's a great idea. And you just move off, you know, onto that. I talked about this a while back. I haven't done it in a while, but I actually did a little experiment with ChatGPT, you know, AI sort of stuff, where I basically went in and told it that we were part of a writer's room, and I wanted to create 4 different personalities and you know, this person is this, and then we're just gonna brainstorm ideas. And I used that to brainstorm ideas, and even that worked well, because I would have it tell me some initial ideas, and I say, I don't like that one, and then I'd say, but what about this one? And then we'd move off on that one, and it would take me in directions I never would have gone myself, but I was able to hone it in and make it my own, but still keep having it feeding me different ideas.
Well, and the beautiful thing when we were in the writer's room is also, so most people don't know this, but there is sort of a vetting process of like, how do you know what your niche is going to be in, right? So there's kind of like, when you start working with people, you'll realize very quickly, some people are really fantastic with dialogue, right? The argument would be that Quentin Tarantino is probably one of the best dialogue screenwriters in history, right? So in Hollywood, normally, if you're really good with dialogue, you're gonna, if you want to have a career, focus your time and attention on procedural type movies or shows, because they're all all dialogue driven. You know, some people were really good with characters, and characters was really good. So now if you're really good with character, you're probably going to go after psychological thriller type projects. Other people are really good with just situations. They not good at dialogue, not good at character, but they're very good at coming up with like just outrageous situations. Those guys, we would push them into situational comedies, because they're the ones that come up with the fresh stuff. And then some people, and this was sort of my superpower when I was there, were scenes. They would have and back in the day, we don't have this anymore, but back then we used to call it the water cooler moment, right? So back in the 80s and the 90s movies, they would always go, what's the water cooler moment? What's the moment of the movie that on Monday morning after the movie's opened, everybody's going to stack around the water cooler going like, oh my God, did you see that scene? And so that's what I was. And those we would usually push into feature films. And so that was sort of, and most of my movies, that's how they started. It started with my ideas, my screenplays would start with just this one big idea, and then I would build a whole storyline around that. And so now when you're in a writer's room, so for me, I'm not really great at dialogue, and I will readily admit my dialogue is not the greatest. So I will come up with the idea, and I'll write the story, and then I'll go find somebody who's really good with dialogue, and I'll say, hey, can you help me make these, this dialogue a lot better than it is? And so you can get the feedback from someone. And it's just like anything, right? In movies, the idea of being a collaborative process, that of course, like we just to get that. For whatever reason, when it comes to our own writing, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, people get very like, oh no, this has to be 100% all me and nobody, otherwise it's not my book. I've heard that. Oh, if somebody else is editing it, then it's not really my book. I'm like, but are you an editor? No.
Yeah.
So then why is it not? I don't. Somebody actually is an editor. That's what they get paid for, right? It's sort of like if you're doing paid traffic online, right? Somebody who specializes in Facebook ads is going to have. He's way different than somebody who specializes in YouTube ads, right? So you don't want to hire a YouTube ad guy to run your Facebook ads, but talking, and collaborating is how you're going to get the best result.
Yeah, and I think, the idea I think that a lot of people have about the solitary process is more around probably more around fiction writing, and the actual process of writing the book itself, as opposed to the other stuff like the editing and the marketing. Because most people, and we always tell people, like, go to the experts on that. You can't be an expert on everything, right? You don't have time. And most people don't have the interest. You don't want to. I hear from authors all the time that said, I don't want to do the marketing. I don't want to do the sales. I don't want to write the blurb. That's not my strength, and I'm not interested in it. And so that's why we say, that go to someone who is an expert in that. It's worth the money that you have to spend, because you'll have a much better product and you'll sell more copies if you get that stuff done right.
Yep. Find the person who's the expert and let them do their thing. All right.
I think that's something that's familiar to most successful writers, because it's like they'll have cover designers, they'll have editors, you can't really do it alone. Or if you do, you do an inferior job and it takes much longer and it's less successful. Yeah,
and you have somebody like Dan Brown, right? And he said that, like, the only reason my books are as good as they are is because my editor is able to help me find the story.
Yeah.
Right. And you look at like how prolific that guy is, and even he's just like, oh yeah, this person helps me get out of my own way. And I think that's probably the challenge of working alone, right? Is it's really easy to get in your own way. So it's like really, so I find it interesting because this whole concept of writer's block, everybody's like, oh, I have writer's block. And so where does that come from? And is it a real thing? And how does that work? But when you look at how our brains work, we're 3,000 to 4,000 thoughts a minute. That's what science says that we're chattering at. We'll talk at 150, 200 words a minute, right? So we're literally, if we're being very conservative, we talk 10 times slower than our brain is actually processing stuff. And now we get in front of a computer and we sit down to type, and most people are only typing at 40 to 50 words per minute. So now you're like 2,000 times slower than your brain. So when you're typing at 50 words a minute, you have 1,950 thoughts bouncing around your head while you're doing that. And I'm saying the right thing. Is that the way it should be? Like, when my English teacher graded me wrong with that, is that the right grammar? Is this good? And so, like, you just end up having all of this noise. And so I think for me, I think that's a lot of times where it's not necessarily writer's block. It's just we're trying to make our brain do something that's inherently just massively slower than how our brain wants. It's like, be like a governor on a car, right? Got a Ferrari that can go 300 miles an hour, but we put a governor on it and it caps it out at 50. And so you're stomping on the gas and the car's like, I want to go faster, but I can't.
I have that issue in the sense that, too many things are going on in my head. And by the time I go to do something, I've forgotten what I was going to do because I get distracted by the other thoughts. And I think that's true. We need that brain interface that, Musk is working on, Neuralink, so we can write our books in instants, that would be
like the Matrix. Be like, just give me the tank. Let me fly the helicopter tanks. All right, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know Kung Fu? Not yet, but I will. So the process that you've gone through too. So you're no longer in Hollywood, right? You're
not full time. People still hire me to consult on screenplays. I still write. I have, like, a lot of what I'm doing with my book work is to actually facilitate getting like I have a couple of low budget films that we're getting ready to shoot here in Vegas. So not at the level that I used to be, but my foot's still in it just because I love it.
And what do you love about what you do now?
I think with what I'm doing, and the reason why I wrote Bestseller by Design was like I feel like everybody deserves to have their voice out in the world and whatever that looks like, right? So right now I've been focused primarily on entrepreneurs because I'm meeting a lot of people that have fantastic processes and strategies for helping businesses be successful and grow. And so I look at that going, okay, if I can help this guy get his voice out into the book, and then he can turn that book into and merchandise it in the right way, and he can grow a 7 or 8 figure business, how many businesses is he helping or saving or rescuing, and how many jobs is that saving? And so the idea of like being able to help really good, ethical, decent people expand their reach to help other people, I guess in a small way, it's my little contribution of like how many people can I help? Because the more I can help, the more I can help the world be a better place. And that's frankly, wonderful. Right now the world seems a little bit chaotic and hopeless. So I'm trying to find people filled with hope and optimism to put them into the world as big as opportunity as we can.
Absolutely. What a great philosophy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So getting back to the idea of the same strategies used for marketing your book and movies. I guess we went through the steps of your movie steps briefly, and pre-production, production, post-production, and then we talked about a little bit about the marketing, sales, but you'd mentioned about some of the marketing strategies of Hollywood blockbuster movies are similar, or the tactics they use can be similar to what you can do with marketing your book. So can you talk about some of that?
Sure. I think the probably the biggest mistake, and I'm guilty of this, just like everyone else, is we're 10 years into what I would call the content age, right? Thanks to Gary Vee, like grind. I'd be putting out 300 pieces of content every week. But what's interesting when we think about that, that's pretty much you talking about you and what you do, right? But as I thought about that, like content versus a while back, I was sitting back going, so, okay, what is it that makes somebody like a true celebrity? What is it that makes somebody like a true movie star? Like, what is it about Tom Cruise that makes him, the biggest movie star in the world? And when you look at those people, you realize that they rarely are talking about themselves. It's everybody else is talking about them. Tom Cruise isn't talking about how amazing he is with his stunts. It's everybody else going like, oh my God, look how crazy Tom Cruise is about his stunts. And I look at that going, it's sort of, we do this weird opposite thing in the business world where everybody's like, talk about yourself as much as you can to as many people as you can. And I think that's the wrong strategy. I think instead, when you create the right strategy to get other people start talking about you. So what does that look like? Podcasts, obviously interviews and having other people talking about what you're doing is one way to do it. Doing featured articles on bigger websites, like really high traffic websites, authority sites like Yahoo, Bloomberg, Medium, Forbes, right? Where the articles are written, and this probably comes back to my journalism background, right? How can you tap into somebody who's got a bit of a voice and have them talk about what you're doing to their audience? So I guess online and social media, the version of that would be influencer campaigns, right? Can you reach out to influencers and work with them to have them talk about you? And when you can do that, I feel what takes you from being sort of like a solid actor, day player. You got your TV show that you're constantly working, as a metaphor of like I'm a coach. I've got okay clients. My business is 6-figure business is okay. But when you can get other people to start talking about you, that's when you now are going to start hitting up into the A list, right? That's when you're going to start getting invited to speak at the bigger mastermind events or the bigger conventions and that sort of stuff, because other people are talking about you.
Jack Carr as an author is a real pioneer in that. He creates like relationships with big Instagrammers and like everyone is talking about it because they're excited about it. It's like, yes, he did great things writing the terminal list and getting it made into a thing. But what's really exciting is when fans get to interact with him, then they're like, okay, let's write articles about him. Let's talk about him more. Let's make videos about him more. And so I can see the wisdom in what you're saying.
Yeah. And you know, we're in this kind of amazing little period right now where even, you know, even celebrities have more direct access to their fan base than we've ever had before, right? You know, that whole concept of the ivory tower that did exist, where there was like arm's length, and they never enter again. And I think some that led to the mystique, but I think there's also something to having, you know, like if you're in England, being able to actually meet the king or have a phone call with the king or have a live stream with the king, right? That's like that's like almost mind blowing that you could actually do that. And I think that's sort of where we're at with celebrities, and especially for us mere mortals in the you know in just writing books and working in the business space.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have any sort of tips for how people would do all those things, or is it just a matter of, you know, reaching out to all those places to try
Yeah,
to
you
get
know,
people to talk
it's
about
like
you?
everything, right? I mean, I have the strategies that work for me, and whether or not but I also happen to be a little bit more extroverted. So I can give my advice, but somebody who's introverted may be like, oh my God, I would never do that, right? But
A lot of
the thing
writers
that,
are introverted, yeah.
yeah, and that's why we enjoy being, and it's interesting because I do have parts of that where I'll say I'm extroverted. Like I can go into a room and work a room and be great and make amazing conversations. But then when we're done and everybody's like, oh, we're going to go out now and party. I'm like, no, I just want to go back to my room and be by myself. So I do need a period where I got to recharge. But for me, the thing that's moved the needle the most has just been going to conventions, live events, so masterminds, you know, doing the smaller, when I say conventions, probably workshops where there's like 300 to 500 people that are coming in attendance, and just being very sort of proactive in not going to my room in between, going in the hallway, maybe, you know, going to the bars and just striking up conversations with people. When I look back at it, I mean, that's essentially how I ended up meeting Jonathan Crane. I had met somebody and we became friends and we're chatting, and he's like, you should really talk to my friend. And he took my screenplay, right? And so it is about relationships. And I think that, so like Jack Carr, I think, is a good example of that. Like he has been very intentional of reaching out. Now, this is the thing too. A lot of people are like, yeah, but these people are getting hit all the time. They are, yeah, of course they are. But if you're creative, and this is like for me, where the direct marketing comes back, and also just a brief story of how I've done this. Do you guys know who ClickFunnels, what ClickFunnels is, or know of Russell Brunson?
ClickFunnels, yes. I downloaded the tutorial of that at some point, but I don't think I've ever watched it. Have you?
Yeah, so ClickFunnels is a SaaS product that helps you build online sales funnels, essentially like websites, but it very strategic. That company is going to do this year. It's hundreds of millions of dollars, so it's a
Wow.
pretty big company. So the founder of that company, his name is Russell Brunson, and he actually launched that company with a book called .com Secrets. And so in my space at the time, Russell was somebody I really wanted to get on his radar with. And so I would be at a conference and I would meet somebody who was, you know, let's say they would be like low A list, top B list celebrities in the Hollywood space, right? And that, hey, do you know Russell Brunson? Oh yeah, I know Russell Brunson really good. Hey, would you mind? And I would, if we do a quick little selfie video and just say hi to Russell. And so then I'd turn on my camera and I'd be like, hey, Russell, I'm at this so-and-so event and I'm here with Dave Asprey, and Dave Asprey has a piece of advice for you. And then I would Facebook Russell with the video. And I did that a few times. And then I eventually sent him in the marketing world, it's called the lumpy mail, right? It was a direct mail piece sent FedEx that was there to catch his attention. And it was just very creative and it was a little bit different. And Russell reached out to me on Facebook. And because of that, I got to know Russell, and we still, you know, we're still Facebook friends. So, but it was just being a little bit different. And now I've also done that and had no response at all, right? The person just completely ignored me. But I only needed one. I only needed one person. Like the once I met Russell and sort of was like, he invited me to an event, and in his event there was, you know, really big players, and got to know them. And I think it's the same way whether you're in fiction, whether you're in romance, whether you're in nonfiction, you know, whether you're in the poetry world. Every niche has its sort of players and experts and the people that everyone looks up to, and nobody is unreachable. You know, nobody is unassailable. Sometimes you just have to be a little bit more creative in what you do and how you reach out to them, right? So like simply, do I know somebody who knows of him and knows him? Great. Hey, do you mind if I do a quick selfie video for 30 seconds? Can you just say hi to, Nicolas Cage lives here in Vegas. I'm working now on people. I'm like, who knows Nicolas Cage? So I can do selfie videos and be like, hey, Nicolas, I'm here with, John Travolta. Say hi, Nick. Right. So, I think that's a simple strategy that can work, especially if you're a little more introverted. Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's a really interesting one and actionable.
Assuming you're going to parties where you're gonna know the people that know that person. I'm not gonna be able to. I don't know too many people that are that are friends with Beyonce, and I'll be like, "Hey, Beyonce, look at me."
Well, not yet, right? But just when you start asking that question, eventually you can. And this is the other thing, like it's no. I'm trying to think. Being an author, and I can't find the right word right now. What am I thinking here? It's no.
Well, you're an author, of course.
It's not a coincidence that when you hear Hollywood, everybody's always talking about the big parties. And it's also not a coincidence that you hear about a lot of like Colin Trevorrow. How did he go from $1 million movie to suddenly he was directing a $250 million Jurassic Park movie? Met somebody at a party that was like, hey, come to the set. And he came to the set and was like, hey, let me introduce you to Steven Spielberg. And Steven Spielberg's like, you're really smart. You want to direct this movie? Now, I know it didn't happen that easily, but he was at a party, met somebody, and right. So there is something to say to the.
No, I don't doubt that it would work if you're in those situations. I'm just trying to think of the equivalent for an author who doesn't run in those circles. How they would necessarily do that. I mean, you can reach out on Twitter or maybe not Facebook,
Twitter,
but,
Instagram. I mean, nowadays, like just being like proactive so I'll share an experience where there was somebody that I knew was an influencer and was just getting attacked in the media, and ridiculously so. It was all like garbage. And I actually shot a video and was like posted it on their wall and was like, this is why all the stuff being said about this person's BS right now. Just that one thing of actually having a video and posting it on their wall was like standing up for that person put me on their radar. They reached out and was like, hey, I really appreciate that. Again, something simple, didn't take very long to do. Like nowadays, it seems like that's probably a good strategy because it seems like every time you turn around, somebody's getting attacked in some way. All right.
Yeah.
Right. And the problem with online is like you can't defend yourself because then you look defensive.
Yeah, then it just
so you need someone else to defend you.
So again, like in the live thing, like I'm using that. I feel like I went off on a tangent with the parties, and I actually completely understand where you're coming with that. So for me, it's like, again, in my space, like how I really started, like in sales copy, how did I really sort of go from kind of nothing to being in the rooms with some of the bigger, well-known people? I would just go to events, and I'll share an embarrassing story. So there was an event that I really wanted to go to. It was right after everything had sort of collapsed in my Hollywood career. I had literally no money. I had like $40 in my bank account, and there was this event in San Francisco. It was $1,000 event, and like I didn't have any money. And I reached out to the guy because I had met him at an event and said, hey, I would really like to be there. Things aren't great with me financially. What can you do? And he said, just come and we'll figure out the payment. Can you give me a couple $100 and we'll figure out the rest? And that's what we did. So I remember actually sitting down and figuring out like how much money was it going to cost me in gas to get to San Francisco and then pay for my meals. And I realized I had just enough money to pay for my gas to the event and back, but I didn't have enough money for a hotel room. So I actually drove to San Francisco and I slept in my car. I had a suit. I was in a room with all these guys that were 7-figure marketers. Was completely paranoid they were going to discover that I was sleeping in my car. But at that event, I met one guy and we started talking and he hired me, and that was my first sales copy job. And that job was big enough that it attracted the attention of a guy who was a very big sort of coach in the sales copy world. And he was like, I can't believe you just did that. Like, we should talk. And then he started working with me and that launched my career. Right. And it was just, I put myself in a position where I could meet people. And at the same time, I also put myself in a position where, like, what would have happened to my reputation if somebody would have found out I was sleeping in my car? Like, I don't know if I would have recovered from the embarrassment of that, to be honest.
But you're not embarrassed about it now, are you?
But that's what launched my sales copy career and got me my first job, my first paying job, and that job got me out of not only having $40 in the bank account.
It reminds me of when people say that someone got lucky or whatever, and then there's that response where you're making your own luck. You could say, oh, you got lucky and you met that person, but you look what you had to do to put yourself into the position to meet that person. There was a lot of work that went into doing that a lot of people wouldn't have done, wouldn't have thought.
It was also a huge gamble, right? I was basically maxing out my last credit card to get there and home, and I would have had zero breathing room when I got back if that hadn't worked out. But I think it's also just having a belief in yourself, and I have a tendency to be a bit of an optimist and feel like things are always going to work out. Even when things don't work out down the road, something will happen. You were like, oh man, I'm glad that didn't work out.
Yeah, even when things aren't working out for you, they're working out for you.
Yeah, it's like that old was it the metaphor or the story of the Japanese guy and his son, and they're raising they have a small farm and a couple of horses, and they're farmers, and so they need the horse to till the field or else they can't grow anything. And something happens one night and the gate gets left open and they come out and the horse is gone. And the son is like, oh my God, the horse is gone. I'm like, this is a disaster. This is the worst thing that's ever going to happen. We're going to starve now because we can't do it. And his dad's like, well, good event, bad event. And who's to say? Let's just deal with what the reality is. We don't have the horse. Let's do what we can. And then 3 days later, the kid wakes up in the morning and the horse is back, but it now has 5 mares, wild mares that had gone and found. They all came back. So now instead of 1 horse, they have 5 horses. And the son's like, oh my God, we're rich. We don't have to be farmers anymore. Now we're horse breeders and we're going to be gazillionaires. And this is the most amazing news ever. And the dad's like, well, is it good? Is it a good event or is it a bad event? Who really knows? What we have is the horses. So let's just deal with the horses. And so then the kid's working with the horses and he falls off one of the horses and breaks his leg. And then now the village is like, oh man, that's really bad luck. Your son this horse broke his leg. And the dad's like, well, good luck, bad luck. Who knows? And 4 days later, the emperor's army comes through. We're going to war against the Mongols. And all men are being conscripted into the army. Well, the son's got a broken leg and he can't get conscripted into the army, right? And so what good luck that is, right? And the dad's like, is it good luck or bad? Who knows, right? So it's like, who ultimately really knows? All you can do is just deal with the event that's in front of you. But Craig, to your point, right? The also thing is you need to put yourself in a position where those opportunities can find you. And again, I'm saying it live events because a child of the 2000 aughts, right? Live events were a big deal. We're in a new world now where online virtual communities are becoming the normal thing. So, so now it's just how do you leverage that to still connect with people? And I think personally, in some ways it is a lot easier because if you're creative and you can create even like a short minute video that just is very entertaining and engaging, and you can post that and tag people in it. How many things is Elon Musk kind of caught his attention because it was creative, and he's like, oh, that's creative, that's different, and he'll comment on it, right? And so there are the opportunities that we have there if you want to use them. You don't have to, but they're there.
Yeah. We're in a connected world now, and I mean, look at Roland and I. We've known each other and worked with each other for, going on 10 years now. We've never met in person.
So, wow, the restraining order he took out. But we spoke to author Jen Milliken, who she made a TikTok. Suddenly, her 4-year-old book that had been languishing in the ranks became a bestseller. Got optioned for a movie. It's like the opportunities are out there and none of us are taking them, and then we can't complain about it.
That's it, right? And I think it is, right? And so that's part of the I think part of the new era that we live in is the sort of the blessing and the curse. So up until maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, right? The reason you wanted a publisher is because a publisher could help put your book in front of a lot of people, and that was sort of the reason why you wanted the publisher. But that's no longer the case now. Like, we have the opportunity to put our book in front of whoever we really want to, if we have a bit of a budget, or we're just very creative in how we're reaching out to people, right? And like you said, the TikTok videos are free. You know, can you create an entertaining TikTok video? So Russell Brunson with ClickFunnels, he has this phrase where he says that, you know, you're only one funnel away. And so what that means is you're only one funnel away from becoming a millionaire. You only need one idea that sells one thing that then sells them a few other things, and you can make a lot of money. With your book, it's the same. I mean, you're really, like she proved, right? One TikTok video away from being a bestseller and having an option for a movie, right? And once now that she's optioned for a movie, she's got an agent, and now what other opportunities are opening up, right? So I think that's the best piece of advice. And that's part of what the movies process is about, is how do you take what you have and then leverage that to get you further down the road, right? So if you only have one book, how do you leverage that, the tools that we have to get to that next step? Maybe for you, it is a book publishing deal or an agent, right? Or maybe it's just, let me build my audience a little bit more so that when I release my second book, now I have an email list of 1,000 people that I can promote to, instead of only having, you know, grandma and mom buy my book.
Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we're going to have to wrap this up. But I think that was a good, actionable note to wrap things up. Travis, thank you so much for spending the time taking to talk.
Thank you. This has been great.
So where can people find out more about you and everything that you've been speaking about today?
Sure. Well, my book, Bestseller by Design, it's obviously on Amazon. There it's $20. If you go to my website, which is bestsellerbydesign.com/book, you can get the book for $5. And I also give you a bunch of goodies for just getting on my email list. So that's bestsellerbydesign.com/book. And then obviously, if you want to get on my newsletter and kind of follow what I'm doing, you know, I am still active in screenwriting. I have my fiction books coming out. You know, we do have an online community of writers. That's just traviscody.com. twofirstnames.com.
Well, that is wonderful. We'll make sure to pop a link down there in the description down below. Craig, before we wrap up, any last words?
You know, just thanks for coming on, Travis. This was really fascinating. I feel like we could talk to you about a whole number of topics. But, you know, maybe this was the one podcast that is, we're one podcast away from our big, you know, discovery. This is the podcast. So
this is it. Nicolas Cage is going to hear this podcast, and he's finally going to do that lunch with me here in Vegas.
Yeah, post this on his wall. Yeah. Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Travis.
Thanks for the time, guys.
If you've appreciated what Travis has to say, make sure you leave a comment down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, click like, share this with your friends, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. So until then, goodbye.